Hi, my name is Andrew McLaren. I'm going to go over ChatGPT and how it solved this question. I shared it with the language model, and while it was able to calculate the exact answer, how it did so did not really explain it, and it was very, very abstract and very unclear as to why we were doing what we were doing. So I'm going to show a bit of how I would explain this using some drawn models. This was actually from a tutoring appointment that I had, and it got the correct answer, but it was very unclear how. So in this question, we're on a bank, and there's some movement of a car going around that bank. We're trying to figure out how it could move if it was at the very bottom of this bank and at the very top of this bank. So if we're thinking about this, if there's a um, radius that's slightly different, um, and we're getting the same acceleration into the center, the velocities might be slightly different. So that's kind of like the main idea, where it's like there's some slightly different speeds. And if you think about going around this curve, there's going to be a slope to it. And if you want to work with the force diagram, you could either work with like what I call x prime and y prime on the slope, or like the old school x and y just directly sideways and straight up. And you actually want to think about it this way because the force of gravity is not causing it to go up or down at all. It's actually just accelerating sideways. So you want to have this acceleration going directly sideways, and this orientation will actually do that for you. Um, but you're going to need to break that force normal down into its components using the trig function. So the fact that this thing is sloped at like 15 degrees is useful, but we need to get that amount that force has been sloped to figure out how much force normal is going in the x direction. So to get that slope, you're going to have to take the information that was provided in the problem and figure out the slope. So they're telling you in here that there's a height. So we know the height of the wall, and we know that the radius is slightly different going into the center of this ramp and the outer part of this ramp. So the inner end of the ramp and the upper end of the ramp, you've got like these two different distances, so you can find the difference between them using a little bit of algebra. So we do that, we get 65 meters, we got 18 meters, and then we use our tan function because we've got opposite and adjacent to find the degrees. Then we can use those degrees to get this force normal and figure out what's going on with our force normal in the x direction. And we can also define our force normal in the y direction, which should be opposite what gravity is. So whatever gravity had downward, then the force normal is just that value upward. So you could think of this as the negative number, that force gravity, then the force normal in the y direction is just the positive mg. So there is a relationship between um, these two components, and you can relate them to the two formulas. One being just the m times g for that force normal in the y direction, canceling out gravity, and then in the x direction, you've got the acceleration being equal to the v squared over r, which can be substituted into F equals ma to give you force centripetal, which is equal to this mass times velocity squared all over r. So if you have those two formulas and you also know what theta is, you can then solve for the velocity. So that's essentially what they did here, but it's just so condensed down. It does not make sense to a human. Like, it gets the correct answer, but it is very unclear. And we've got slightly different radius values that we're plugging in. So you're going to get slightly different velocities. So the one that's like closer in doesn't need to be going as fast, and the one that's further up can be going a little bit faster. As r is getting bigger, so is the velocity. Kind of like cancel each other out in the formula. So yeah, the ChatGPT definitely helped me a bit in terms of like how do I approach this problem, what parts are related, but there was definitely some finagling or refining of like, how do I explain this so that a human can actually know what we're doing and why we're doing it this way. It's just a bit too um, condensed here and unclear. So yes, hire human tutors, at least for now.